Thank you for joining me back here on the last segment of today's show. Anthony, how you're doing? Welcome back to the show. And in the question you said, do you think the air raid can work as a standalone scheme in the NFL, or would it have to be paired up with the West Coast so it doesn't become a gimmick? That's an interesting question. I think it could work as a standalone scheme in the NFL just as long as you have the right personnel to do it. It really just all comes down to that, honestly, because the NFL is so, I feel like it's so player determined now that you'd really need some of the elite players in your position to really have a chance. And almost like scheme goes out the window. I think it could work, but it doesn't produce those results at the end of the day if you don't have the players in place to efficiently produce at that scheme and to execute with any scheme that you have. The scheme can only get you so far, I believe. If you don't have the talent nowadays with how the NFL is going, more pass heavy, more offensive heavy, it really just comes down to having more talented players at times than the other team, and more often than not at the quarterback position. So, not to say that the scheme doesn't matter at all, but I believe it can work as a standalone thing. But to me, the bigger issue is finding the players that fit that scheme, and near the top of the NFL at their position, I think is almost more significant at this point in where we are with the NFL and how it's played out. But good question. I like that about the schemes and the NFL and everything like that. But we're going to just talk briefly about some of the last contract extensions or some of the latest ones that we have going on here in the NFL. The first week has brought a lot of different news, some fights breaking out and things like that. All entertaining, all great videos too of some new connections, all kind of enticing everybody to knowing that football is back. But with that comes the contract talks. We've talked a lot about it already with guys like Brandon Ayuk, guys like Amari Cooper, Matthew Stafford, Dak, everybody trying to work out their situations right now. But some of these guys have had their contract situations resolved before anything gets too out of hand. And one of them I wanted to start with was Amari Cooper. As you see on your screen, he had held out of minicamp over wanting to get a new deal, and he was entering the final year of that 5-year, $100 million contract that he got from the Dallas Cowboys in 2020. But now, sources believe that he was going to hold out of training camp. But on Tuesday, the Cleveland Browns announced that they had come to an agreement with Amari Cooper over restructuring his deal in this last year of his contract. It's not an extension, but they did change it in the matter of that $20 million that he was originally set to make as a base salary. It wasn't guaranteed. There was no guaranteed money left on his contract, but now the Cleveland Browns guaranteed that entirely. He is getting that $20 million up front and guaranteed, and also he has $5 million added on through incentives that he could still make through this last year of his contract. He is still set to be a free agent in 2025. At 30 years old, the fact that the Browns didn't really extend him, even though he threatened to hold out, it could lead me to believe that this could potentially be his last year. I don't want to completely guarantee it like T. Higgins or Brandon Ayuk or anything like that, but with a growing wide receiver market, this could be a great chance for him to move on, maybe make some more money, for the Browns to just really go over all their options. And if it doesn't fit in with what they want, ideally in a price range for Amari Cooper once he is a free agent, then they don't really have to work out too many things contract-wise. So it could lead to him being this last year in Cleveland, but you don't know really too much. At 30 years old, it's not too past the point where I think teams are going to stop coming for him, but we'll see. We'll see. Interesting situation with Amari. He was one that I thought would get an extension, but the Browns opted to not do that. Then moving on to our next player to talk about, Matthew Judon, was a player that I mentioned on here before on trying to figure out a contract, cooperation with the New England Patriots, them starting a new era with their new head coach, Gerard Mayo. Would he fit into this new plan? Did Gerard Mayo have Matthew Judon in this vision of where he wanted to carry this team on in 2024? He did show up to the Patriots training camp. He plans to participate in the training camp. He's not going to hold out or hold in like any of these other players. And again, he is entering into the final year of his contract, and he is only set to make $6.5 million as a salary in this final year. So a little bit confusing, out of the ordinary. All the sources I saw around this situation said that he was unlikely to play. Some sources said that it was guaranteed going to be his final year as a New England Patriot, that no deal was close to being done, no extension was close to being done. So with all that, it screams to not show up to training camp. But Matthew Judon, on the topic, he said that he didn't really like holding out last year over the same contract dispute that he had with the Patriots. So he decided to show up this year. Obviously, he wants a new contract. He wants something to get resolved, but he wasn't going to hold out again like he did last year. He said it just didn't fit who he really was and what he really was about. So he's going to show up. He's going to participate, and hopefully that leads to him getting a new deal for his benefit. I don't know if it fits what the Patriots are trying to do or what Gerard Mayo's trying to do. Nothing has been really said about that too much in terms of progressing forward with Matthew Judon on the team, so it's in a gray area, but surprising a lot of people, Matthew Judon showing up. The next guy I wanted to talk about is on the screen, Alvin Kamara. This one's the one that's furthest back, I think, from getting done, or the least likely from getting anywhere close to being resolved, because he also had skipped the last part of mandatory minicamp for contract-related issues, but Kamara still reported to this year's training camp. The first day was on Tuesday, and he did show up there with the rest of his teammates. There were some comments he made, I think recently, yesterday or on Wednesday, just basically saying that he's not stupid. He's not going to get fined a lot of money, honestly, for missing days when he's still under contract. It's not a situation where he's entering the final year of his deal. He still has 2 years left on that 5-year deal, and he is still one of the highest paid running backs. I think he's still second in that category to Christian McCaffrey. So basically, it didn't really scream at him to hold out. I thought it was heading towards that, but he showed up. He showed out to the training camp for the New Orleans Saints, and it is a similar situation with guaranteed money, because on the last 2 years of that 5-year deal, like I mentioned, the issue is the lack of guaranteed money left on the final 2 years, and NFL media reported that they don't see this deal getting anywhere close to being done. They don't see a new deal down the line for Alvin Kamara and the Saints, especially because NFL reports said that Kamara, if the Saints were to release him after this year in 2024, the Saints could save up to $19 million in cap space if they move on from Kamara after this year. So that's obviously massive for them, and that might be more important to them than any other team in the NFL, honestly, because they've been stuck in this drawn-out cycle of trying to figure out their cap space. They've overpaid a lot of their stars, and now a lot of them are heading into the latter years of their career, and they're in a bad space, or not contract-wise, but salary cap-wise, so alleviating close to $19 million per year. And with Alvin on your team, I don't think anybody really still has any expectation that the Saints are just going to click and be in the playoffs at all this year. So, with that combined with saving a lot of money, it just seems to me also that this could be the last year for Alvin Kamara with the Saints. And if he wants to work out another long-term deal elsewhere in free agency next year, I think he'll be one of the most sought out after players, honestly, just based on what he brings to a team. But with the Saints, alleviating a lot of that cap space really, to me, just signals it all as the end for Kamara. But we'll see. I don't see too much benefit in extending him if you're going to save a lot of money with releasing him. So that's where I'm at with Alvin Kamara. And the last man I wanted to talk about is the one on your screen, Matthew Stafford. Not holding out of training camp officially. Sean McVay announced that on Tuesday, that the Rams and Stafford had agreed to rework his contract and probably get him some more guaranteed money. The fine details of what they agreed upon and what they did with this new look contract wasn't disclosed like it was with Amari Cooper. But you can imagine that there is guaranteed money now included on this new contract, because that was the biggest issue as well. Like Alvin Kamara, like Amari Cooper, there was no guaranteed money on the final 2 years of Stafford's contract. After 2024, he had 2 more years left after that, and there was no guarantees, and that's not something that's ideal for a 36-year-old quarterback, so he wanted something to be done about that. He made it evident during OTAs and minicamp that he wanted that to get done, and that's where all the threats of holding out came really from, that he wanted more guaranteed money, and there was no progression up until recently. They agreed on that reworked contract, so now he doesn't have to hold out, and no details about that have been disclosed, but that's probably the best case scenario for the Rams, and honestly for Matthew Stafford, for everything that he's done for them in this period that he was traded there in order to get them to the Super Bowl. Nobody really thought, I think, it would have worked out as perfectly as it did. They had a great team, but to still go out there and do it in your first year definitely surprised a lot of people, surprised me, and he got them that Super Bowl. They traded a lot away to get him, and not only did they get to the highest peak and achieve the main goal, they are still consistently a good team. They've been able to work around trading away a lot of their first-round picks and now have somehow one of the youngest, most exciting teams by building still through the draft and not having to sign all these free agents. They've done a great job at it, and Matthew Stafford is clearly the leader and just the pillar of what you want your players to look like in that organization. So keeping him, they did right by Matthew Stafford to kind of repay him for everything that he's done for them. It works out great. He stays probably until the end of his contract. By that time, he'll be probably close to 38, 39 years old, and then that way you have more of an amicable departure rather than holding out and this getting ugly. You don't really need that. The Rams did good by him, and now he doesn't have to hold out, and the Rams have all their team there for the start of training camp, obviously, but that's all. That's all the players I wanted to get to on just recapping some of the contract situations currently in the NFL with some of these players. And with that being the case, that'll wrap it up for today's show. I want to thank you guys for joining me on today's episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Please remember to always like, follow, and subscribe to the show, and also follow the network on all forms of social media. If you want to see more of the show, check out both YouTube channels, the GSMC Podcast Network channel and the GSMC Sports Network channel, for all different variety of forms of stories around the NFL, YouTube shorts, individual videos, and all the live videos are all on both YouTube channels as well. Finally, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more discussions and stories around the NFL with me, Manny Maradiegue, as your host. Thanking you again for joining me, and I hope to see you guys back here with me to wrap up the week tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to